Great, thank you very much. So I am Alex Bantock. I'm a founder's associate at Preoptima, and we are a climate tech company focused on trying to help decarbonize the built environment. Today I'm going to be speaking about our PACER tool, the planning application, carbon and evaluation and reduction. So before I get into it, a little bit of doom and gloom. I know in sustainability we're sadly notorious for this, but I think it's important. We are set to overshoot our 1.5 and even 2 degree global temperature rise limits. I'm sure everyone on the call today is based in the UK. I'm calling in from Australia, but you've experienced massive flooding in the last few weeks. I know your recent summer had unprecedented heat waves, so the impact of that temperature rise is starting to be felt. However, the good news is that the built environment is a significant lever to reduce that impact. It accounts for 39% of global carbon emissions. Of that 39%, 28 are from operational carbon. So that is the carbon to do with heating, cooling, lighting your building, energy, and water use. And the other 11% is from embodied carbon. So until now, this embodied carbon has pretty much been out of sight, out of mind. It's all of the carbon emissions incurred before and after a building is occupied. So that has to do with the extraction of raw materials, the manufacturing of building products, transport of those products to site, construction processes, and then the end of life scenarios, deconstruction, demolition, waste processing, and hopefully recycling and reuse. And I really love this imaging to showcase how important embodied carbon is and arguably where we are going wrong with current building regulation and planning policy. To date, we have been solely focusing on operational energy or operational carbon. But as you can see here, that's a cumulative impact over a broad spectrum of time. So around 50 years if you're looking at a 60-year lifespan of a building. That impact can also be mitigated. So there's a huge campaign to retrofit buildings and improve their energy efficiency so we can actually decrease that operational impact. However, embodied carbon is incurred in such a short period of time. And contrary to the 11% I showed previously, as we're decarbonizing the electricity grid, that impact is actually set to rise to account for around 50% of a building's total impact. And to date, it's being largely ignored. So once these emissions are released at this upfront stage, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't take them out of the atmosphere. That impact has been embodied into the building. So this really just showcases why it's so important to include both embodied carbon and operational carbon in planning through a whole life carbon approach. So that's why whole life carbon regulation is so important. And if we're to reach our net zero goals by 2050, we need to reduce our carbon emissions by 81% by the year 2035. So that's really around the corner. And the only way that we can do that is by looking at and reducing our embodied carbon impact. We can do this through introducing something called whole life carbon assessments as part of planning requirements. And what this actually means is that developers will now need to measure and hopefully reduce the whole life carbon impact of their schemes in order to get planning permission. It's easier said than done. In industry, there are so many tools that are available for carbon assessments. Industry also has the resources to procure these tools or hire external consultants if they need it. But like the old adage, with great power comes great responsibility. And this is where local governments are feeling the greatest pain. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but local governments are understaffed. They lack the appropriate skills and specialist training, as well as the resources to procure solutions to help them. As an example here, the City of Westminster just introduced a new retrofit first policy. Prior to that policy being implemented, they were processing around 30 whole life carbon assessments per year. They also have in-house expertise, so they have a principal sustainability officer and a whole life carbon officer to help them process these assessments and these applications. However, with the implementation of the new policy, that will increase to 600 assessments to be processed per year. So there's no ways in any scope that the average case officer and these two in-house expertise will be able to process that number of assessments without digital intervention. Before I look at digitization and how it can help the process, I just quickly want to show you what a business as usual whole life carbon review process looks like. This looks complicated for the right reason, because it is. And you can see that there are so many stakeholders involved. It's a convoluted feedback loop between the different stakeholders. There's an exchange of text messages, emails, phone calls, different versions of documents, different types of documents. We have Word docs, Excels, and spreadsheets and PDFs. And this really makes it hard for a case officer to make a meaningful decision on top of having to scrutinize highly technical whole life carbon assessment data and hold developers accountable. So we really need to focus on helping case officers deal with this process through digitization. And that's exactly why we created PESA. We saw the pain that local planning authorities are experiencing, and we wanted to help case officers enforce whole life carbon policies with confidence. And confidence is such a key word here, because we want them to make data-driven decisions that are auditable and that are backed by the data of the scheme, not just qualitative decisions. That's why we got a Innovate UK grant, and we collaborated with the City of Westminster to build PESA. And with any software tool, it's really important to build with your end users in mind. So that's why we focused on building for local planning authorities with local planning authorities. So we collaborated with over 36 other local authorities and public sector organizations to ensure that PESA is intuitive for the end user, but also powerful. We want them to make decisions that ultimately reduce the impact of a scheme that is being built. So as I mentioned, PESA is a digital tool. It allows applicants to easily submit their whole life carbon assessments. It then acts as a technical co-pilot for case officers. So it performs automated compliance checks and then provides them with feedback to help them initiate that conversation with the applicant. A very important thing to note, and I think this is so important for any digital solution, it does not replace the role of the case officer. It more so holds their hand and guides them through the process and basically empowers them with that ability to scrutinize technical data. It also acts as a centralized database, so it enables carbon tracking across a project lifecycle, as well as across projects within a single jurisdiction. This is really important because it provides the insight and data that you need for future policy making, for benchmark creation, and just general decision making within a council. So if we reflect back on what that business as usual workflow looked like, you can see here why digitization is so important and how it really streamlines that convoluted process. There's a single exchange of information. Everyone has access to the same and most current version of information. There's also version tracking. There's that added bonus of automated data validation and compliance checking. So this really enables case officers to make meaningful decisions and hold developers accountable with confidence. With anything to do with sustainability, we really want to get to the center of what is the actual impact at the end of the day. And we did some impact modeling and estimation exercises with 3 prominent London boroughs. And we found that PESA's impact potential, or the impact potential of a digital solution, can be up to 22,000 tons of carbon emissions saved per year. For many on the call today, that's quite an abstract number. It's hard to almost visualize what that even means in terms of a saving potential. So to try and put it into some sort of context, that's the equivalent of saving over 4 times the City of London Corporation's Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So saving the emissions from the council-owned buildings and vehicles, as well as the electricity purchased within the council in a single year. So just from digital innovation and empowering local authorities through implementing this digital tool, they can save a massive amount of carbon. Here, just to reflect on a quote by Hebrina Nikolova, Principal Sustainability Officer at Westminster City Council. She believes that PESA will help bridge the gap between policy and implementation, and she's confident that it'll be a key driver in the implementation of carbon reduction policies in planning nationwide. To finish off now with my last 2 minutes, just reflecting on some future insights and where I see sustainability in planning, and more particularly carbon mitigation and planning. So I see two key trends. The first one is that we will increasingly need digital tools to help address these green skills gaps. So there's not enough expertise, both in industry, but especially in the public sector, to be able to cope with these evolving sustainability requirements that are coming as part of planning. So case officers will need digital tools to help them make meaningful and sustainable planning decisions. It'll be very rare that they will be able to do that on their own. The second is the need for data and accountability. I know for many councils, the thought of implementing a whole life carbon policy or whole life carbon requirements may seem like a really daunting process, especially if you haven't even taken that first step in your sustainability journey. But what I can say is that there's not one size fits all when it comes to climate policy. So councils will differ in terms of their prominent building typologies within their jurisdiction. All of them will contextually differ, and that's why it's important, just as taking that low-hanging fruit, to start off with requiring developers to measure first. So ask them to measure the impact of their schemes, report on that impact, and then down the line, as you collect data, you can start to use that to create bespoke policies for your council and ask them to then reach carbon limits for their scheme. So just start small, but you can't manage what you don't measure. So that's why that measurement piece. So thank you so much. I know that was a bit of a whirlwind presentation, but if you'd like to find out more, please do get in touch at pace@preoptima.com, or you can email me directly at alex@preoptima.com.